Well, for the first time probably since we began this program, I cannot be blamed for us being late. Tonight's tardiness is thanks to my bearded co-host, Steve McRae, who cannot master copy and paste, and for that we will forgive him. But nonetheless, it should be noted that on this day, I did not cause us to be late. So
I had nothing to do with this. But I tell you what, your hair is perfect. So your hair is perfect, so it wasn't you.
I started at 3:30 today.
Yeah,
it's a process.
Now we've been ready to go for since 10 minutes till. So my little mix up there didn't have too much of a dramatic effect. I mean, Tony was losing his mind. He was going nuts. He was just going crazy. He was throwing things, and I mean, look at him. He's all agitated, and we got to calm him down. That's what took forever. We had to go, Tony, breathe, deep breaths.
I had to do my best. I'm calmed down now.
Well,
see how excited he is. I mean, you see this?
He is. Let's go ahead and say hello to our two guests today. We have Pastor Sylvester Williams. How are you today, sir? Today, I can't speak. How are you today, sir?
I'm blessed of the Lord Jesus. I'm blessed of the Lord Jesus. I thank God for His grace, His love, His mercy, for salvation that's offered through His blood. Amen. How are you?
I'm good. I understand that we are both North Carolinians, so a fellow Tar Heel. You're actually right down the road from me. So, yeah.
That's correct.
Bible Belt in the house.
Yes.
And Tony Reed, the voice of Prophet of Zod's. What is the name of his series, Tony Reed? It escapes me at this moment. Do you know? Does he have a name for that animated series that he does? Tony, look. I know you're not you.
See, Tony got so excited his computer crashed.
I think it's stage fright. I think it's.
I had
Tony,
nothing.
It's okay.
See what he was telling you. I had nothing to do with this. This was Tony.
Wait, I still hear Tony. You're frozen, Tony. You're
stuck in time, Tony.
Unless you're like a killer staring down contest.
Or a residual ghost? Are you ghosting? Tony? He's gone.
He's gone. Okay. Well, while we wait for Tony to come back in, this will be a good time for Steve and I to update you guys on what we've got coming up here soon and some other little tidbits. I touched on it last night with Ron, but on the Golden Nuns, which is on the 25th of November, and you can vote for those, by the way, if you haven't already, by going to tinyurl.com/Golden Nuns. There are two parts to it. The first part is a kind of fill in the blank, in which you will choose. Sounds like there's a. Steve, am I really high, or did you hear that too? And you're muted.
Oh, and I'm muted.
Oh,
no,
man.
I muted. No, I heard something and I muted to make sure it wasn't from me. It's actually from, I think, Pastor Williams. So
am I being punked? I have to be being punked right now.
It's Friday. It's Friday, right? This is what happens on Friday, right? It's to be expected, right?
No. Welcome back, Tony. While you were gone,
Tony,
I tried to have a conversation with Steve to kind of fill in the dead air, but he was muted, so I was really just talking to myself. So I'm glad you're back.
Because I wanted to make sure that it wasn't coming from me. But Tony, is your computer okay? I mean, you keep dropping.
I'm not all of a sudden. It's just disconnected all of a sudden.
Maybe we may be having one of those VMix nights. Keep your fingers crossed, America. Well, Dave, it's close enough. It's close enough. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass it along to Steve, who's going to kind of give you a little bit more information on our two guests, since he has. I believe you've known Pastor Williams for a while. This is my first time meeting the pastor. By the way, Tony, just to let you know, I'm looking forward to your showdown on the roast.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
You sound so excited, Tony.
I'm telling you, he's just going nuts, man. He's going crazy today. I don't know what it is. Is he on cocaine, coffee, what? I mean, look at him. He's just as high as a kite or something right now.
Because we love you. We pick as we love you. But anyway, Steve, tell us who we have and then what we're going to be discussing tonight.
Okay, we got Tony. Everybody knows Tony. If you don't know Tony, go watch his stuff. No. Anyways, we'll start with Tony Reed. Tony Reed, welcome back. You guys may know him from previous things we've had on the Non-Sequitur Show and my channel. He has his own channel, which is Tony Reed, and it's basically him telling stories about why creationism taught him real science. That'd be a good way to put it, Tony?
How creationism taught me real science. Yeah. How I looked at creationist arguments and found them random.
Very good. And
Excellent.
Pastor Sylvester Williams, I do know from Facebook. We haven't really talked too much. He was a mayoral candidate for Durham in North Carolina, which is from Kyle's neck of the woods. Kind of a firebrand young Earth creationist that's against fossils, I guess, would be a good way to put it, right? Pastor Williams?
You can put it that I'm biblically based, and whatever science agrees with the Bible, that's where I am. And what we found out that has happened is that there's been a lot of indoctrination that have taken place that have convinced people of things that are lies and that are not true. And that's why I'm here to share the truth for those who've been indoctrinated to believe otherwise.
Okay, so you don't accept evolution, and fossils are, I don't want to misquote you, fossils are either put there by Satan or fossils were put there by other people, or fossils don't exist. I don't remember. What was your...
No, they're all fossils. One of the things that I will say to you is that, and I think you've read one of my posts on Facebook, is that they found a shark off the coast of Portugal. And this shark, they said, had fossils showed it was 80 million years old. And they found out that shark had not changed at all from the fossil that was supposedly 80 million years old. These are the things that I'm talking about.
Is that what you're talking about? The megalodon?
I'm not sure if that was the correct name they used, but it was a shark off the coast of Portugal.
Okay, I don't remember if it was a megalodon or not. But anyways, so...
And that was in November last year.
Okay. So I guess they wanted to have a discussion on old Earth creations versus the fossil record, seeing which one is more in line with the observations that we make. I know that I think, Tony, you have a presentation, and are we going to start with his presentation, or are we going to start with Pastor Williams? His
he can start because what I'm here. I'm here to refute any bad teaching that he may have received.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. Good.
Tony, you're way too excited for this, man. I'm telling you, you got to calm down.
He popped out again. That's why.
I know. I'm not having
any. That's why he's asking.
And check. I'm not doing anything. It's not me.
Okay. So let's do this then, guys. Tony, we'll start with you, and you can state why it is that creation science would not be the way to go. We'll go with your presentation since you've got one, and then we'll let Pastor Williams. It's from last night's show.
He looks like a doctor, though. Who did he look like a doctor? He looks like a doctor.
Well, in my faith, I am a doctor, so. But I'm so.
Okay,
so
there you go.
Continue.
I thought I saw it written somewhere that way. Yeah. And an Asgardian.
That is true.
Asgardian faith. Yeah, he's Asgardian faith.
All right. So, Tony Reed, sir, whenever you are ready, we will turn it over to you, and you can begin when you are ready.
Okay. All right. I'll not worry about the slides until I'll just ask you for slide number 8 or slide number 5 or whatever I need when I need it. I don't really need the slides for the presentation, though. But again, my name is Tony Reed. Good to meet Pastor Williams. At any rate, as far as addressing whether creationism actually has a model for it, I actually don't know the old Earth model that well. I know the young Earth model, but I'm not extremely familiar with the old Earth model. But I do want to talk about how, because the the point that I was supposed to be addressing is, does the fossil record support, or does it demonstrate an old Earth? And so I'm going to start with slide 2, which would be the definition of evidence, or at least how we use evidence in science. And in science, when we discuss evidence for a theory, we're not just discussing individual phenomenon that are consistent with the theory. We're talking about confirmation of scientific predictions that are made by the theory. So if we go to slide 3, of course, a scientific theory is also falsifiable, which means that the evidence, if it doesn't confirm the theory, then it falsifies it. It's a way of knowing true or false. So you make a prediction, and your theory actually puts its own neck on the line, basically saying, if this is not true, then we know the theory is not true. And then there has to be rejected or revised. And this is actually where creationism fails. So if we go to slide 4, it's one thing to see similarity in genes between species and say that it will be predicted by intelligent design. It's another thing entirely, though, to publicly predict that common descent is predicted by evolution, that this homology would exist. It would be predicted by evolution. And if we don't see it, we know that we either have to revise the evolutionary or reject it. Finding no similarity, then, would falsify common descent, which is essentially what we're working on. And that's exactly what's happened. Evolutionists, if I may use the term, and I know how much of an issue that is, but if I'm using that term, we predicted that there would be a similarity genetically between different organisms on different species. And the thing is, that's what once we conducted experiments to see if these similarities are there, and I do have reference, I'll be glad to publish anytime you want a link. Hopefully that'll be up, I'll be able to have it up there when this is publicly available. But we've been able, when we've done these experiments, when we've looked at the genes, we have seen codes gene code features that are just between different species. We have not seen anything like that with creationism at all. Creationism has seen a similarity, but only after that was it ever pronounced that that was a prediction made by either the Bible or just the idea of an intelligent designer. So slide 5, the origin of the hypothesis begins with Unitarianism, which was proposed by James Hutton in 1785. I don't believe he actually called it that, but the prevailing theory of his day was that everything was brought about by a major catastrophe, either a flood or other event. With slide 6, Hutton recognized geological processes at work. He realized that the Earth was perpetually being formed and reshaped. So from there, he reasoned that the history of the Earth could be determined by understanding how processes such as erosion and sedimentation work as in the present day. So this was an assumption that the same geological processes that operate in the present day have always operated, which is known as uniformitarianism. Now, Hutton noted deposition rates for sediments and erosion. He noted characteristics in granites, which indicated it had once been molten, but also was protruding other materials that also had their own obvious indicators of a change of some sort. He also realized that a single catastrophe, like a flood or an earthquake, really couldn't account for any of this evidence, but a series of geological events over a long period of time could. So with slide 7, we move on to Charles Lyell. Between 1830 and 1833, Charles built upon Hutton's uniformitarianism theories. And with slide 8, please. He was looking to earthquakes as a creative force, and he noted the results of then recent earthquakes causing surface irregularities such as faults, fissures, stratigraphic displacements, depressions. After Lyell and other scientists observed that certain fossils only appear in particular layers, these fossils became known as index fossils, which aren't used to absolutely date anything. That's a very common creationist, I would call it a canard, but that the idea that they date the fossils by the layers and then they date the layers by the fossils, that isn't how it's done. Index fossils are used as a starting point. They offer a practical starting point for dating for the dating methods that come, which would be radiometric and such as that. Lyell, however, would continue to study geological anomalies. He continued to his theories over 12 subsequent editions of Principles of Geology, which was a very large tome, several books. I will give you a link to that, but it is hard to get through. At any rate, eventually he calculated, due to the rates of the natural forces he studied, a minimum age of 300 million years for the Earth. So with slide 9, meanwhile, Lord Kelvin postulated that in addition to geological forces, the first and second laws of thermodynamics would also apply for the entirety of Earth's existence. So with slide 10, he concluded that at some point in the past, the planet was a red-hot globe. And by studying volcanism, he calculated the temperature of Earth's interior, and he determined that the Earth planet was at least 20 million years old. Now, he was unaware of a little force of nature that we call radioactivity. So with 11, in 1903, Mary Curie, her husband Curie, Paul Villard, Ernest Rutherford discovered that radioactive decay was another mechanism of heat generation, allowing for radioactive decay. Scientists realized that the interior of the Earth was liquid, and evidently at some point so was the surface. So with slide 12, based on the discovery of radioactive decay, Rutherford and his student Frederick Soddy became the first to realize that radioactive materials steadily transmuted to different elements due to alpha and beta decay. So with slide 13, essentially each time a radioactive element releases a particle, it reduces the number of protons and neutrons it contains, and this happens because the atom contains an unstable configuration of protons and neutrons. So for example, when uranium-238 breaks down, it slowly becomes lead. Uranium-234 becomes thorium. Rubidium-87 slowly becomes strontium, and potassium-40 becomes argon. So with slide 14, please. If uniformitarianism is true, and this is where we're going to do that whole testing, falsifying. If uniformitarianism is true and all of the strata were deposited individually over time, we should expect to find that the ratios of daughter elements to isotopes will increase as we examine older and older strata, in line with the scientific law of superposition. So in older strata, there would have to have been more time for isotopes to transmute. So as it turns out, that's exactly what we see. In lower strata, uranium-238 is uniformly found with more and more lead. Uranium-238 is consistently found with more and more thorium. Rubidium-87 is consistently found with more and more strontium the lower we go in the strata, or at least when we go towards, at a consistent rate. And potassium-40 is always found with increasing rates of argon. Now, maybe it's just a coincidence, okay? This is a prediction, and it happens to be true. It does not really, it will never prove the theory of superposition. It will never prove uniformitarianism, but if we didn't find those, we would know that uniformitarianism, those principles are wrong. So it's also, the thing is, it also happens to be the very prediction that an old world would give. But I've also been told again by creationists that this correlation might be due to something like atmospheric anomalies. So slide 15, please. This doesn't explain why we see the same correlation in strata on the moon. As we go deeper and deeper in strata on the moon, we see that change in the ratios from the isotope to its daughter elements. So slide 6, this is where the record makes confirmed predictions, assuming the theory of common descent. We can use the taxonomic system to where we should expect to find specific fossils corresponding to specific ages. Slide 17. For example, that I believe is 16. Next one. Either way. Yeah, there we go. These three guys, Edward Dashler, Neil Shubin, Farish Jenkins Jr., they were all able to predict ahead of time where they should be able to expect to find a fossil of an organism, if you'll show slide 18, which appeared to have wrist bones similar to tetrapods, and slide 19, yet had rays that were similar to ray fin fishes, And then slide 20 with spiracles in the head, which would be indicative of a lung system in addition to a pectoral girdle separating the head from the body with a neck. They predicted this, and they predict that this morphological combination of tetrapod fish traits would be found in Devoniata on Ellesmere Island in Nunavut in northern Canada. And after 5 years of excavation, slide 21, they found no less than 3 individuals that matched the back traits. These individuals were eventually named Tiktaalik. We see this quite a bit. So slide 22, with all, I can find several instances where we've taken, whether it's true or not, the assumption of an old world of common descent, and we've been able to take that assumption and make predictions to find fossils exactly where we expect to find them. And I can go through quite a few if we need to today. But like I'm saying, maybe the theory of common descent might be wrong. Maybe the planet really isn't old. But it is quite coincidental that both assumptions have repeatedly made these kinds of predictions, both genetic, paleontological, and so on. Slide 23. This same methodology is what scientists use to find human ancestors or even different dinosaurs. It's the ability to predict where to expect to find fossils in the fossil record, where we can demonstrate that there is a multi-million-year minimum age for the Earth. With slide 24, and you'll be glad to know that's my last one, I'd be interested in finding out if the pastor can name any discovery that was ever made by testing any prediction made by any hypothesis based on assuming a creation event, let alone a 6-day creation event 6,000 years ago. Now, I know you aren't all right, from what I understand, Pastor Williams, you're not a young Earth creationist, so I guess we can disregard the 6,000 years ago part, but at any rate, I'd love to see what kind of discovery we've ever made utilizing the old Earth creation hypothesis. And that's my presentation.
Excellent.
There's a ton of information. You're going through your things, and you have so many falsehoods. I don't know where to start. But I'm just going to go with my presentation, and then hopefully you can see the error of your ways as I go through it. First of all, as I started off by saying, the rare frilled shark they found off the coast of Portugal, talking about fossils, 80 million years old. This is according to BBC, what they reported, 80 million years old. And they found out that this shark had not changed at all from the fossil that they had of this same shark. So, this stuff about 80 million years, 100 million years, these things just simply go out the window. These are numbers that are thrown out because they're and I feel that oftentimes that evolutionists, they use these numbers in order to add credibility to what they're saying without really understanding what 80 million or 100 million years really are. The other thing is that they're talking about, as you're looking at radiocarbon dating, that is not that reliable over 1,000 years. You try to extrapolate that. Dr. William Stansfield, who was he's a biological science professor of biological science at California Polytechnic State University, states that the helium in the air, that all this stuff is rising. So it was a decreasing amount. So in order to say that, okay, use radiocarbon dating to actually verify or identify the age of something is just simply false. There's no accuracy to that for what you're doing. But I'm just going to go through what I have here. The other thing you're talking about as far as the age of the Earth, if you look at, I'm not sure you're talking about Homo sapien, most records and accounts that we have the Homo sapiens been like 24,000 years old. If you look at that, you was to extrapolate that going forward, there is not enough space here on Earth to contain the people. Right now, we're at about 7 billion people. If you look at what they say, 5,000 BC, there was about 5 million people. If you do the numbers, that's like 139,000% increase. If you go back to these million of years, you're talking about 24,000 year period you're talking about, and try to extrapolate going forward, there's not enough space here on the Earth to contain the number of people, that should be here on the Earth. So that's where you're in error there, number one, as far as that. The other thing, you're talking about as far as how did life begin? Spontaneous generation. What brought everything about? What brought everything into focus? What made it brought into creation? And then you said, what thing can I point to? I can point to the sun, moon, and stars, and see, okay, this is what the Bible pointed to. You cannot explain that. There is no way that you evolutionists. That's one reason. That's one place where they fall apart. they cannot explain how everything started. They say, well, okay, everything just happened, has always been. Well, then that go against thermodynamics, because the second law of thermodynamics says that things are decreasing, that the mechanical forces, which gives way to energy, showing that we're decreasing instead of increasing, that we're dying instead of growing or evolving. So that puts that to rest, that theory you have there. Other thing I say, the whole idea about evolution is no more than a racist idea. Carl Linnaeus and Charles Darwin were both racist. Carl Linnaeus made the statement, who was the forerunner of Darwin, that blacks were sly and lazy, that whites or Europeans were industrious. This was the whole background, the backdrop to evolution. And then what do you see happening from there? You see Hitler, Nazi Germany, picking up on that same type of thinking, and that's with the extermination of Jews, millions of Jews, and also you see the same thing with the way that they treated black folks, look upon black people as being inferior. Evolution is based on no more than racism. That's all it is. And what has happened is, in order to support that theory, so it's not so you're racist, they throw in these millions and billions of years. The Supreme Court in 1968 showed you what the ideas were. In 1960, the Supreme Court here in the United States of America said there's only two choices. It's either evolution or creationism. The reason they rejected creationism wasn't because of bad science. They said because of separation of church and state. And so what has happened is that you receive decades of people being indoctrinated with only evolutionary teaching with no support. There, you don't see any shapes and forms. If you look at evolution, evolution tells you that we branched off from a tree and from an ape. There is nothing to support that, nothing whatsoever. How did the tree come there? How did life come from the tree? How did those things happen? There is no support for it. And so you see all these things having to be said. Then you have to ask yourself then, why are these things being said? Then another thing you talk about the geologic column. Where do you find it? Where is it that you can actually see the whole column from beginning to end? You don't see it. You see a small part of it. You make, as you said, extrapolations. You make guesses as far as what you think it is or what it will be. But that it's not there. It's not in the geologic column as Dr. Stansfield once again said. The other thing that we're saying to this right here is that when you talk about how did Moses know that there were tectonic plates in the deep? When you read the book of Genesis, the book of Genesis said that the thing that caused the global flood wasn't the rain from the top, but it was the plates that was broken up from the bottom, as the Bible says, that caused the floods. Then we see that this is where the mountains come from. You say, well, and there are instances in the Andes Mountain, they have whales on the top of mountains that are thousands of years old, asking, how did a whale, how did fish, how did marine life get on top of a mountain? It was from the global flood that happened there in the book of Genesis that Moses spoke about. How did Moses know that there was more water in the deep than there was coming from the sky? He didn't have a submarine. How did he know that? Same thing with Job. How did Job know that the earth floated in the air and there was no strings, nobody holding it up? He didn't have a spaceship to go out there and suck around the earth. These are things that the Bible proves and shows and substantiates that this thing about evolution is no more than a fraud that's been perpetrated on people to support racism. But people don't want to admit they're racist and believe it in evolution. Because one of the first things you say that you find out in evolution they teach you is that where did life begin? They say, well, it started off in Africa. So if it started off in Africa, the first black man that was there then, or black woman that was there, where did the rest of life come from? So that if Europeans and others came about, does that mean that they're more evolved than blacks are since they came along later? Like I said, it's a racist theory. That's what it is. It's based on a bunch of lies. Everything that you've stated, there are scientists, there are doctors that have refuted everything that you have said, not just me. And so what you're trying to say, if this is such science, and science means knowledge, if it's such knowledge, why are there so many different opinions on it? Why isn't everyone in agreement with what you say? The reason why is because you're in error. The things you're saying have no truth to it. It was all brought about to support racist doctrines, racist teachings. I can go along and get some other things. As far as water from the volcanoes, it's been estimated that 70 volcanoes the size of Mexico's produce 0.001 cubic mile of waters per year, or 4.5 billion years of Earth's history could account for 315 cubic miles of waters in the ocean today. There are now approximately 600 active volcanoes, almost 10,000 dormant ones. 600 volcanoes comparable to could account for present ocean approximately 0.5 billion years. What I'm trying to say, I just got statistics on top of statistics to show the things that you were saying, they're not true. They're wrong. They're false. There is no facts to it. And anything you say, I can prove it. We can take them one by one. I can show you the error in each one that you put forth.
Can I real quick say, be careful you banging on your desk, because we've noticed that you have a TV in the background that's very precariously kind of there. We don't want that falling off and hurting anyone.
No,
So just be careful.
It's good.
Okay, we're just making sure, because
I feel like I've been hit with a TV.
Yeah, a couple times. Tony.
Tony. Yeah.
Yes.
There was a lot there. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know where you want to.
Okay.
Well, I was taking notes as he was presenting. So first of all, I will say I should have probably stated this prediction ahead of time. But now, unfortunately, creation. In reality, I've often said, you'll see in any of my comments when I talk to people, that usually what I find when people have an objection to evolution, they either are misstating what evolution claims, or they're misstating what the scientists claim about evolution, or some combination thereof. And this is exactly what I just saw. The first thing, the frilled shark. Well, first, there's nothing in evolutionary theory that says any creature has to change morphologically. If it is very well adapted for its particular niche, there is no pressure for it to change. Now, I haven't had a chance to really look into the frilled shark, and I might do that. I may as well. I've got a season coming up. I've covered the coelacanth. I've covered the horseshoe. These are creatures that are often cited as having not changed at all, but in fact they have changed quite a bit. And in fact, none of those species that we see in the fossil record do we find today living. They might be related, they might have some, but they're not the same. Second thing, carbon-14 dating. The thing about carbon-14 dating is that it's not just how much carbon-14 is left, it's how much now there. And we always see these videos from 14. Seem to be wrong on the dot.
Is he clipping for anybody else?
Yeah, Tony, why don't you turn off your camera, because you're clipping pretty hard right now, and that might conserve some of your bandwidth.
So I apologize.
It's okay. Just see if you turn off the video part. You can do that down below.
That?
You're clipping.
Okay, turn off the camera.
See if that saves on your bandwidth. That might help the audio.
Okay, is this better?
Let's see.
Well, we'll see.
Keep talking.
Yeah.
You want to whack it? I can't see him.
So, yeah, you shouldn't be able to see my camera turned
Yeah,
off,
you're
specifically clipping.
Do you have something? Hang on. Do you have something running in the background? Do you have extra programs running in the background? Do you have something downloading in the background?
Well, here's what I'll do. If you guys, if I can try for a minute, I might try getting back on with my cell phone.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, you're
bear with me.
That'll work. While we wait for Tony to come back in, I
could go on while we're waiting on him. He could respond to these other things.
By all
They did a study on fruit flies at the turn of last century, and they thought because the life of a fruit fly is so short, they said, okay, over 30 years, we could see some type of change of evolution. They bombarded with all kind of things that they think would bring about evolution. But at the end of 30 years, they discontinued the study, and the reason why, because at the end of 30 years, a fruit fly was still a fruit fly. It had not changed at all. This study they did. And this is the thing that I'm saying. So they put all these things out there talking about change and evolution and evolving, and you don't see it. It doesn't happen. And they want to continue to hang their head on it.
Would you like me to address that? I mean, I can. So
you can address anything you want.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
let me explain to you. Yeah, Pastor, let me explain to you what the problems you have here. They do
No,
experiments.
we're not talking about him. We're not talking about him blanking out. I'm talking about the evolution. I'm talking about him not being able to see his picture.
The experiments they did on Drosophila was they modified the Hox genes to have morphological changes, right? You've seen those studies where you have like a leg coming out as an antenna because an antenna is a modified leg. So what they tried to do was explain, because way back when they had what's called an organizer region in smaller, lesser evolved creatures, and that organizer region over time has become what we have now as what we know as the Hox genes, the homeobox genes. A fruit fly, right? That what we call a fruit fly. They've never expected for it to ever evolve to a non-fruit fly. Fruit flies will always be fruit flies. A population of fruit flies for eternity will always have more populations of fruit flies. That's how evolution works. So what's happening is you have this weird straw man version of something that no scientist in the world would ever come up with, because that's not how it works. That's not how any of this works. So the experiments that you're referring to did demonstrate exactly what we were trying to demonstrate, is that why do we have morphological changes? Why is it that the heart's positioned here? Why is it the brain's positioned here? Why do we have segmentation? Why do we have a bilateral symmetry? It is because this is all because of evolutionary stages throughout our phylogeny. So the experiments you're referring to were complete successes because they did demonstrate by modifying these Hox genes, and you could see the changes. You can actually look at the genes and see the changes in the Hox genes between different lines and see how they've changed. But this narrative that they expected fruit flies to become something other than fruit flies is just categorically wrong.
No, you're wrong. And the thing, and one thing what you just said,
I'm wrong.
And I don't know if you recall what you just said.
Hang on, we gotta fix this.
Pastor, hold on one second.
Pastor, hang on, we gotta fix this. Tony, your mic's killing me. Tony, you're killing us, Tony. No, just no.
Okay, well, hold on. Hey, stop moving. Now let's see if we can hear you.
Okay.
Now say something.
Okay. Now this.
Hold on, Pastor.
Well, hang on.
Pastor, wait. We're gonna let you finish. Hold on one second. Tony, can you hear us?
Tony, you there? Is he with us?
Maybe we just need to wait long enough for it to evolve, like Hovind would say.
Tony, did you drop your phone in the toilet again? It sounds like you're underwater.
I do. So I'm working on it. So.
Wait.
There we go.
Oh, we have something. Oh,
you can hear me now?
Yes, but
sort of.
It also sounds like you have an 80s synthetic band with you.
Funny enough, I'm the lead singer of an 80s synthetic band.
See? Look at that. Okay. Now say something. Are you moving around something, Tony? Like it's something.
Yeah, it's like a bad flock of seagulls.
It's like you're scraping at something.
I'm endeavoring to try to actually get a clear connection for you guys.
Okay. Don't move. Don't move. That was perfect.
Yeah, don't move.
Oh, now you're moving.
I'm not moving.
You're moving.
It sounds. Let me tell you what it sounds like. It sounds like you're moving either your mic across something, or if you have a microphone and it scrubs against something.
Yeah, my life sucks.
Is it picking up feedback from your other mic, or could it be picking up feedback from anything?
Yeah, it's feedback. Yeah, close your other thing out because it sounds like you're getting feedback.
Yeah, close the other browser out.
Yeah, it's not going to work. I'm going to try one more thing. Be right back.
Oh, wait.
Well, that's actually good. So no, it's not.
He's really right here.
Yes, that's now I don't hear it.
We could. You want us to pray for you?
Now I hear it. It sounds like somebody.
And Pastor Williams, I think he's frozen. And now we got Pastor Williams. Are you there? Oh no, he's not frozen.
I'm here.
He had the same facial expression for like 60 seconds. I was like, oh, we lost him. Okay, Tony, you got to go back to the other one or something. It's not going to work.
Yeah,
I'll be right back. Hold on.
Oh, it sounds so bad. All right.
It sounds like you're getting SETI signals from space. While we wait
like alien.
there's an interesting thing that you touched on that I feel like.
This is what I was about to say.
Why do you think
this is what I was about to
he's
say.
racist though?
Hang on, Pastor Williams. Hang on. We have a lag here. Pastor Williams. Wait a second. We got a lag. Hang on, Pastor Williams.
Yeah.
We got a lag here. Wait,
See,
Kyle's trying to talk.
What you're gonna now we got Tony. Hold on. Now say something, Tony.
Hopefully you can hear me.
Oh,
yes.
God,
Can you hear me now?
that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Prayer works.
Brilliant, huh? All right.
Yes. Okay.
Shall I continue, or are we on another subject entirely?
No.
Oh, hang on.
Pick up
No.
where you left off. Pick up where you left off.
Can I respond to Scott before you continue? Because Scott made a point while you were away. And one of the things he's talking about,
Steve, yeah, Steve.
Yes, he made a point about the Steve. I'm sorry, Steve. Yes.
That's okay,
So,
Mr. Thompson.
No,
Okay,
you know what?
Steve.
You're right. No, hey, by the way, you know what? My parents may have been wrong. They may have gotten my name wrong. It's possible. They might have named me incorrectly. My name could have been Steve. They just been calling me. My name could have been Scott, but they just screwed it up all this time.
Okay,
they could have been wrong.
let's get this back on track somehow. Let's try to steer back towards the debate.
It's fine. No, you call me anything you want, man. Go ahead.
Okay. The thing that I was saying is and I think he just showed two inconsistencies there with evolution. One on land, one in water. He said that with the fruit fly, well, who said they was going to evolve? That's what we predicted. Then with the shark, well, the frill shark, well, this who said that it has to evolve. So you got something at 80 million years old that didn't evolve at all. You got this fruit fly that didn't evolve at all. Of all this bombardment, trying to test it, trying to get it to the point. And use these examples and say, well, they just didn't evolve. So how can you conclusively decide or determine that evolution works when you've already, just in this short period of time, we've already showed you two that did not evolve at all. And
okay,
so
let me finish
you're
up.
trying to take a claim to something.
Let's do it quick because we want to get back to Tony and
I'm gonna finish that real quick because let me finish it real quick. The problem real quick, Pastor Williams, is what you're using for the word evolution is what nobody else uses it for. Evolution means a very specific thing in biology. It means a change of allelic frequency in a given population from one generation to the next generation over time.
Okay, let me say this.
That's how everybody.
Let me say this. I'm going to make sure we're on the same page. Are we talking about microevolution or macroevolution?
No, we're talking about evolution.
Which one are you talking about? Micro or macro? No, there's a difference in microevolution and macroevolution.
Cool, we're getting off. Tony, pick up where you left off.
I think it's lost. I think it's lost the plot. Go ahead.
We'll get back to that, Steve, at the end.
We should get back to that, but let's keep in mind that we've now veered off the subject completely, which was, does the fossil record support an old Earth? Whether or not there's evolution or not, the subject is, does the fossil record support the old Earth? I didn't really see a response to that at all. I didn't really, but I'm going to continue what I was saying here. The other thing about population, that was the other thing you were talking about, the population. Now, I've done an episode on population figures throughout history. One thing that we know for sure, older populations didn't have the medical advances we have. They didn't have the technological advances. They didn't have the agricultural advances. So, the population has just catapulted since the 1800s. Now, I forgot his Henry, the very popular creationist, is the one that actually came up with a figure that led to 1 billion people in 1800. And those figures would seem great. If you do the math just right, you'll end up right back at the flood and having 8 people. But again, those were numbers that were picked out of the air specifically to support that particular figure. In reality, populations don't just grow. They grow and they shrink down. There have been times where human beings have been very successful, like right now, and yet at the same time, there have been other periods in our past where we see indicators of declining population figures. So to expect any kind of population to continue growing at a steady rate is just silly, especially considering we know for sure that bacteria grow at a rate that you can observe on a daily basis. And if they continued reproducing at that rate, we would be currently swimming in an entire ocean of bacteria within a couple thousand years. So there's really this idea that there's any kind of a steady population rate. There's no evidence for that. Spontaneous generation.
But then, just before you go on,
I'll let you. Hold on. You let me talk for a while. I'll let you talk for a while, and then I will talk. I'll let you talk again. All right.
Let's not talk. I'm going to both plenty of time.
I'm going to address every one of your points, and then feel free to fire back at me. Spontaneous generation is one of the things you brought up. We're talking about abiogenesis as and several different models for it. Do we know how it happened? No, we don't know how it happened. But that doesn't mean we don't know, that we can't figure out what has happened to life since it appeared here. If you want to put God there and say God put life here, sure. Okay, fine. I don't know how you're going to scientifically make any discoveries based on that. But when we do make the assumption that on some level, naturally, life must have formed through chemical processes, we are able, in fact, to perform experiments based on predictions based on that model. I have an entire episode on just discoveries that were made by using that assumption to make an experiment happen. But also, I know there's got to be one of the people in your audience that's probably saying, well, abiogenesis is just another word for spontaneous generation, and it isn't. Spontaneous generation would be a type of abiogenesis that we know for sure cannot have happened. But the type of abiogenesis we're talking about would be something more like incremental generation or gradiential, whatever, a gradient of generation. Now, the second law of thermodynamics, you brought that one up, and I've done an episode on this too. The second law of thermodynamics does not say the world is breaking down. It doesn't say the universe is breaking down. It simply says that in a closed system, and there's a reason why we put closed system, but don't worry about that. In a system, the entropy of that system will increase until it reaches equilibrium. And at that point in time, the third law of thermodynamics kicks in. Now, entropy does not mean things are breaking down. It just means that you can't calculate where a particular particle is going to be at a particular point in time. The racism part, I wish this would be a better one for us to do an entire episode on, because I think it's important to address. I know there are people who have used evolutionary theory for their own racist means, and nobody can contest that. You're talking about Darwin being a racist. That is the guy who was one of the most outspoken critics of slavery. And since his theory has been since he produced his theory, what we have seen is slavery being abolished. Christianity, creationism, had thousands of years to fix this problem and never did. So now we have a solution. Now, does it have anything to do with evolution? No. But to draw a correlation between the two is absolutely silly. The fact is, and when you're talking about Hitler specifically banned Origin of Species in Nazi Germany. He preferred what's called Lamarckism, because he actually more specifically Aristogenesis. He actually thought that nature had a preference, like a goal, to create a better and better individual. And for you to, if anybody was to claim that he was right in doing that, they would also have to claim that for some reason Jews were somehow inferior. I don't think anybody here is making that claim. Not one person here is making that claim. So I'm going to go on to the next thing. You talked about trees evolving from trees to apes. Trees are not in our trees are not at all in our gene pool. They're way back. They're way early in the eukaryotic domain. They separated from what became fungi and animals long beforehand, and we know this genetically. We can again make a prediction. If we see a relation between fungi and animals that is a little bit closer than animals and fungi versus plants, then we at least have some evidence in favor of a common descent. But if we don't see that, we have a way of falsifying it. And I've asked you for a way to make a test using creationism to falsify it. If we don't see this, we know creationism is not true. You have not presented that. The geological column. I actually have an entire list of places where you can see the geological column. Unfortunately, I was too busy trying to get connected again. So you're going to have to look in the, hopefully in the description later on. Job, the earth I guess the line is, he suspendeth the earth upon nothing. Well, earth is not being suspended. It's falling. And it is, in fact, above something, because it's falling toward the sun. It is falling in a roundabout pattern, but it is falling. Make no mistake. Now, that said, there is no possibility. The concept of a below or above makes no sense in outer space anyway. So I don't know what he could have possibly meant, suspending the earth upon nothing, because there was nothing to suspend and there was nothing to be above. And then the last thing, this is where, okay, life started in Africa. No, I don't think anybody's saying that. I don't think we know nobody's ever really made a clear decision on where they thought life started. Now, maybe the beginning of our human lineage began in Africa, but when people left Africa, the people that were still in Africa continued to evolve too. That doesn't mean they're worse or better. Now, if somebody has told you that because your ancestors stayed in Africa that they're lesser, I will join you in telling them how wrong they are. And I'll join you in telling them to go to hell. But that is not, that comes from a misunderstanding. And that's what's really the problem here, is that the theory of evolution is not really taught very well. And I think it's because most people are bored in science class, but I wasn't. So I've been paying attention to this for a while. I have gotten myself all worked up, which is something I don't normally do. But I'm going to give the floor back to you, my friend.
For the record, I will say we called it at the beginning of the show. We said, "Calm down, Tony," and we were just using our psychic power. All right, Pastor.
And Tony, one minor quick thing. Tony,
calm down.
The second law, isolated system, not closed. It's isolated system. Just got to be pedantic.
I appreciate the correction there.
Okay, all right, Pastor.
By the way,
let's do this too. Make sure try to keep it at a one issue or one or two issues at a time and talk on that, so that way we don't get a list going and we don't get lost. That way,
earlier.
Yeah, you two can go back and forth.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah, that's
not a problem. Just make that way we don't lose
Okay.
anybody. But we'll get to all your points. Just let's keep kind of continuing. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay. The thing I was trying to say earlier, as far as macro versus macro, micro versus macro, because micro, I mean, yes, change the color of hair, eye color, things like that. Macro, we're talking about going from one to another, from an ape to a person, or transition from ape to a person. That doesn't exist. That's what I'm talking about. That's why I need to define what type of evolution we're talking about. Microevolution, a macroevolution. And that's where a lot of folks get crossed up, they get mixed up. The other thing, talking about no one in society has said that, okay, that man did not come out of Africa. Go back and check Miss Leakey and what she said about first movement in Africa. My daughter brought home a textbook. In the textbook, and so you need to go back and do all these publishers. In the textbook, it had, this was the first African woman. And it was a picture of a monkey in a textbook. And this is why I filed a taxes complaint against the Durham public school system for publicizing stuff like that. Now, these are comments. You said that Darwin was not a racist. Let me show you what Darwin said in his book on the origin of the species by means of natural selection for the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. Who was the favorite racist? Folks say, well, no, you're going to talk about people. Well, listen to what he said. Which race is the favorite race, as this title suggests? Let's look at a few excerpts from his book to understand. This is what Darwin wrote. Meeting the simple Indians of Tierra del Fuego, Darwin wrote, I could not have believed how wide was the difference between savage and civilized man. It is greater than between a wild and domesticated animal. Viewing such a man, one can hardly make oneself believe that they are fellow creatures and inhabitants of the same world. This is Darwin speaking. Carl Linnaeus, who was the forerunner to Darwin. Same thing, listen to what he had to say. This was in the Encyclopedia Britannica. He said, Asians are yellowish, melancholic, endowed with black hair and brown eyes, and has a character that is severe, conceited, and stingy. The African is recognized by the color of his skin, by his kinky hair, and by the structure of his face. He is sly, lazy, and neglectful. He is governed by the arbitrary will of his masters. As for the white European, he is changeable, clever, and inventive. He puts on right clothing. He is governed by laws. This is Carl Linnaeus. This is Charles Darwin, the fathers of evolution. You're trying to say disconnect from that. You can't disconnect from your origins. You can't disconnect from the building blocks of evolution. These were the guys that were the building blocks of evolution. And so now you come out, you create things, you try, and that's what evolutionists do. They make things up on the go. When something doesn't fit their paradigm, they make something. So we just saw about the frilled shark. We just saw about the fruit flies. So, well, no, everything doesn't evolve. Everything doesn't evolve. So you say those kind of things because it doesn't fit what you were saying. And what we're saying is that there needs to be a level of consistency. With evolution, there is no consistency. You're talking about as far as I don't know if you brought this talking about as far as the creation of the earth and all. If you look at the meteoric dust, you're talking about all these billion of years. The earth, it be covered with dust, deep dust, just like the moon. You go to the moon, you don't see that much dust on the moon, as we saw when we went to the moon, and even here on the earth. So this billion year, this billion year time continuum that you're talking about, it's not supported by the meteoric dust that's on the earth, nor that's on the moon. So once again, you're making things up as you go along. And then on top of that, when you come to the earth, you look at the geologic columns. If you go down to the bottom, well, if it was the meteorites and the meteor, where is it in the geologic column? Where do you find it? Since you brought that up. Hello?
Actually, you brought that up. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm asking the question.
Where can you find the entire geological column?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I actually, as you've been talking, I've been trying to run around and scrape up some quotes from Darwin about how he defined race, and in his time, and I'll even. What's that?
This is his book.
Yes, I know.
Species, when he's
I'm going to quote. I'm quoting directly from.
You guys are talking over each other. So, Pastor Williams, you talked. We let you talk. Let Tony, because he's going to explain to you what you're confusing various books, and he's going to explain to you what race meant in Origin of Species, because you got it wrong. Go ahead, Tony.
No, I didn't get it wrong. See, now, if you're going to correct me based on what Darwin said, not on what you think. I just quoted you what Darwin's comments were.
Well, that's what he's going to do. That's what he's going to do. Just let him do it, because we've read the book. Okay, I've read Origin of Species. I know they have.
I have too.
I don't think you have.
I read the book too.
Right.
Yes, I have.
I
read the book.
Really?
Savages. I don't.
Yes. Who are the savages? Who are the savages? Who are the savages?
The savage races. First of all, the savage races is a different book. That's the Scent of Man. That's the different book. We're talking about two different books.
Who's the savage race? Who's the savage race? Who are the savage races?
They are
uncivilized races.
Who are the savage races?
Hang on, Pastor Williams. Hang on a sec.
They're
not talking
black.
about Origin of Species first. Yeah, we're talking about Origin of Species. What were the races in Origin of Species? If you read the book, what is the races that he's referring to? That way, Tony doesn't even have to bother. If you can tell us, I'll be happy to.
The races. I know what people say. I'm going by what I read. People say that. Well, he's talking about the category. That's what I'm trying to tell you. He's talking about what people say. I quoted you what I read. I just read a quote from the book.
Right. Okay. Tony,
I quoted you.
No, you quoted Descent of Man, by the way. You didn't quote Origin of Species.
Who wrote Descent of Man? Who wrote the book?
Listen, Tony's getting ready to explain it to you. Just hold on one second. Tony, go ahead and Tony, go ahead and do your thing about races.
Well, the thing is, race, French word, which is borrowed from the Italian word rasa, it literally translates as species. So it doesn't really originate as a synonym for ethnicity, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. The term, going back into antiquity, the term referred to all descendants of a particular common ancestor. So even in the Bible, they describe races of Adam, races of Noah, races of Ham. These are it's just a marker. It's simply a bloodline. That's all it is. Now here is what's said in Origin of Species, because he never actually spoke. He never really discussed much about human beings in Origin of Species. What he said was, "It is not my intention here to describe the several so-called races of man, but I am about to inquire what is the value of the differences between them under a classificatory point of view, or how they've originated. Even a slight degree of sterility between any two forms when first crossed or in their offspring is generally considered as the decisive test of their specific distinctness, and their continued persistence without blending within the same area is usually accepted as sufficient evidence either of some degree of mutual sterility, or in the case of animals, of some mutual repugnance. Now, I don't know. I mean, I probably couldn't reproduce with you, but I'm sure I could reproduce one of your relatives. And that by that definition, we are the same race. That has not changed. So
Well,
do you want me to
now,
come?
okay, now.
Well,
No. He said something one at a time. One talk at a time is what he said. So now define savage races.
Oh, I definitely do that. At that time, savage race was anybody that wasn't considered civilized. Somebody was basically tribal. And unfortunately, this is something that Darwin did talk about. He did predict that one day the civilized races will supplant and exterminate all the savage races. Now, he didn't say that in a way. Hold on. I let you talk. You're going to let me talk too. All right. He did not ever say that was a good thing. Did predict it, and it was already happening in his time. And if you don't believe me, ask an Indian.
Right. Exactly right. And by the way, I'm still kind of curious, Pastor Williams, can you answer?
I'm responding to what he said. Now, he said, Darwin said annihilate. Do you know what annihilate means? And this is the thing about eugenics. This is the thing about eugenics. What Nazi Germany was all about, the annihilation of a particular race. And that's what Darwin said, the annihilation. I just quoted it to you. I just read those quotes from his book. And see what we're trying to do. We're trying to make
it would happen.
Did it happen?
It is happening, and it has been happening since even before he was born. Are you telling me that people didn't massacre a whole bunch of Indians? Telling me that we hadn't already gone into that Europeans hadn't already gone into Africa and totally annihilated certain groups? I mean, I'm with you on the racism is bad thing. Don't worry about that. But if you're going to try to tell me that his book was in some way advocating a racist activity, you have no basis for that.
What I'm saying is that evolution. Do you know who Carl Linnaeus is? The father of taxonomy.
And he was a creationist.
Yeah.
He was a creationist.
Did you read? Did you see the comments that I read from Carl Linnaeus?
Yes, I did. And he was a creationist.
And what I'm trying to tell you this right here: evolutionists are racist.
I'm not racist.
Now,
I'm not racist. And by the way,
what's the next point? What's the next point?
When did Carl Linnaeus live? Well, quick question I got to ask. When did Carl Linnaeus live? Do you know? Approximately
1700s.
1700s, right? 1700s. Long before evolution ever came around. Evolution had nothing to do with his personal.
No. You need. That's why I thought you said you read
evolutionist.
Darwin. I thought. Wait a minute. I thought you said you read Darwin. If you read Darwin, you know that Darwin read Carl Linnaeus. That's what allowed him to go into some of the things that he did. I thought you read Darwin. I guess you haven't read him as well you thought you had.
That's a fallacy. Just because he read something that he has.
Not either.
Carl Linnaeus.
Go.
In fact, Carl Linnaeus
look it up. Go look it up. Well, I know that's right.
I have. Yeah. I'm so confused now. He's just all over the place.
I know.
Yeah, we got too many conversations. There's too many conversations going on. We need to narrow this down. So it seems like we're going to focus on the racism part. So
I was supposed to be about fossils.
Yeah. Well, that's okay.
Yeah.
I think this is this might be
the second law of thermodynamics. We'll talk about that one now. The second law of thermodynamics. Second law of thermodynamics.
Okay.
Wait, faster. Wait, no, we can't. We either need to go back to fossils or to races. I mean, now we're going from races to fossils to thermodynamics. Let's narrow it down to one topic.
I was trying to follow where he was going. All right, I'll let you lead the discussion there. Wherever we're going to go, it doesn't matter. Wherever you want to go,
Tony, go ahead.
If I may interject, if I may interject here, I definitely think we need to have a conversation about the racist part, and I'll be the sacrificial lamb to and be the one on the evolution is not racist side, but I do think that needs to be addressed because there are plenty of people that feel just like you do, that it is a racist theory. And, I'm here to tell you it's not, and I'd be glad to argue that for hours. I am not prepared for that today. However, we are talking about fossils, and the only thing you've really mentioned about fossils today is really the differences between human and Apes and Woman Africa. Now, I haven't seen the book.
Repeat
I
that.
believe you. I believe you. No, let me finish. I promise. You know I let you talk. I have let you talk.
Tony, you broke up.
I said you broke up. I didn't hear what you said.
Okay.
You broke up, so repeat what you said.
Oh.
My apologies. Okay. You were talking about the textbook where they said this is the first woman in Africa, or maybe the first African. Now, I
Switch your camera off,
can't
Tony.
see the textbook.
I don't understand
sorry
this
about
at
that.
all, folks.
Yeah. Switch your camera off. See if that works. You're getting bad again.
Okay, how's this?
Okay.
Any better?
That's
Is
a
it
little
the
bit
same?
That's better.
A little bit better?
That's better.
Okay. All right. So what I was saying is, whatever this textbook is that was saying this is the first African woman, I'd be the first one. If I look at it, it says exactly what you say in the verbiage that you say it. I'll be the first one to say that textbook should be banned. It should not be in a school. It should not be there. That is not a scientific paper. No scientist has determined that's the first African woman. Now, there is one of the first women that we're aware of is the famous Lucy fossil, obviously, and that would be a woman. I don't think by most definitions any scientist would define her as a human woman, but definitely she was a member of a species that is very likely to be an ancestor of our species. And when I say our species, I mean yours and mine, the one we are both in. That woman is apparently very closely related to our ancestor. But you were also talking about the differences between apes and humans. Now, I don't know if you have a distinction between speciation and morphological change, and they're not the same thing. Morphological change happens. We see it all the time. Go look at a bunch of dogs. Go look at their skulls. They look comparing them to their wolf ancestor, they look absolutely different, but they don't look quite as different or they look actually far more different to each other than humans do to other apes. Now, that said, humans are more morphologically different than apes, but that happened after speciation occurred. Now, speciation, all it does, it doesn't make changes happen. And that's where the macro comes in. Micro is just evolution, just changes in allele frequency in a population. Macroevolution is once those two species or two populations are separated, they speciate. They can no longer breed. And I do have plenty of documentation of worms, of different animals that we've actually witnessed speciation events. If you want me to, I'll be glad to go ahead and take a moment to look up. I think it's Nakaris inuminata, I think is the name of the worm species. We do know that they do separate. So what speciation does, it doesn't cause the changes, but whatever changes happen between two separate populations, that speciation causes them to be permanent. I yield the floor.
One of the things you said as far as what the Bible says, everything makes after its kind, which means that man is made separate from dog, which means that man and dog cannot mate. Man is made separate from ape, which means man and ape cannot mate. Everything, if you look at DNA, the DNA shows you that we are different, that we cannot mate, that there's always been that difference. You don't see any crossing or blending of the lines between mates and humans or humans and trees. You don't see that. And so what we're doing, we're making this great leap in saying that, well, speciation and they broke off and then they can't go back and make. How does that happen? So you mean to tell me that life as we know it now, at some point in time, someone in the human race will not be able to mate with other folks in the human race because of speciation? That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. If you have made it once, but at some point you can no longer mate. That doesn't make sense. The other thing, this right here, what you were talking about there. Well, let me finish. The other point you were making is here. Transitional forms. Where are the transitional forms? The earth has been inundated by people. We've been to the North Pole, South Pole, East, West. Where are the transitional forms? You don't see them. You don't find them. A doctor Isaac Manley was a professor at UNC Chapel Hill. And one thing that he said, that everything they say about transitional forms are no more than cartoons. There are no transitional forms. And so you're making all these assumptions that we branched off from this. They're not there. And you would think that as populated as the Earth is now, that you would see the transitional forms. They're not there.
I just put a link in the video. I just put a link in the live chat for people of a list of transitional forms, hundreds of thousands of transitional forms. So you can people in the live chat.
You're not,
Tony.
You're not being truthful. You're not being truthful.
I'll let Tony respond. Go ahead, Tony.
Okay. Well, I'm first of all, Steve. I'm glad you did that because I keep saying I did an episode on this, so I sound like I'm shamelessly plugging my channel. I apologize for that.
You should. But, you have the best channel, dude. We love your channel.
Thank you. I do. I have actually done.
By the way, that was for free.
I didn't. I do actually. Pardon me. I do have 4 episodes based on just transitional fossils, and the best part about these is exactly what I said before. When it comes to finding transitional fossils, we're able to see one form and then another form and go, well, they might be related, but if they are related, we should expect to find a creature with these kinds of features and these kinds of features that are intermediate between the two, and they have done so. I just discussed that one in Nunavut, Canada. So transitions, there's plenty of them. I've got 4 episodes on it. So I guess I'll shamelessly say, hey, anybody who hasn't seen my show, go watch those 4 episodes. I made a playlist for it. Now, as far as here it is. Now, as far as speciation, you're saying it doesn't make sense that they can never reproduce again. In 1964, several individuals of a worm called Nereis acuminata were collected in Long Beach Harbor, California. They were allowed to grow into a population of thousands. 8 individuals of that population were transferred to the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute in Massachusetts, across the country, where their population in turn also expanded. Now, over 20 years later, a team that was led by James R. Weinberg performed tests on the Woods Hole population and the 2 groups from the original population in California. The Woods Hole population were observed to successfully mate at a rate of 75% of the time. Populations 1 and 2 from California were observed to successfully mate at a rate of 95% and 80% of the time, respectively. Now, when populations 1 and 2 were allowed to mate freely, they also successfully mated at a rate of 77%. Then, populations 1 and 2 were separately paired with the Woods Hole population. Both pairings yielded a successful reproduction rate of 0%. Within the time that they were separated, it was about 20 years, within that time, there had been enough genetic distinction between those 2 populations that they were no longer able to mate. And that's what we're talking about with speciation. And I can cite numerous other examples of that. But those are the only 2 subjects you brought up this time. So I'll yield the floor again.
Okay, all right. Now, when you say mate, what do you mean by mate? Just quickly, give your definition of what mating is.
Creating babies.
Making babies.
Now, have you ever heard of a mule? I mean, some of the things you say, it just doesn't make logical common sense. Have you heard of a mule? You know what a mule is?
I'm curious.
I can't wait to see where this is going.
Yeah, I want to know what this is going to. This is interesting.
Can a mule have babies? Can a mule have
1%? 1% of them can.
Very rarely. Once a month.
Exactly.
It's very rare.
So what I'm trying to say is there are some women that can't have babies. That thing, as long as they're able to mate, that. I mean, come on. You look at the common sense. A little common sense. Just because something doesn't produce a baby does not mean that is a change in species. That's
actually exactly what it means. That's exactly what it means.
So you mean to tell me all these women that can't have babies? So you mean to tell me all these women that can't have babies, they're different species?
No, I didn't say that.
What?
I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. It's ludicrous what you're saying. It's ludicrous. It doesn't make sense.
We're talking about an entire population, not individuals.
Yeah.
They didn't pluck out worms that couldn't reproduce. They were worms that who were sexually viable, who could not reproduce with each other. Now, there are women who can't make babies, but that's because they're not sexually viable at all. It doesn't matter who's plugging it to them.
Yeah, and I think you're confusing what's called a hybrid. A mule is a hybrid, clearly. That's not speciation.
Yeah.
So there's a completely different thing between hybridization.
No, but
and
I'll try to make the
speciation.
point. I'll try to make the point
conflating
that.
But your point's
Yes, that's
invalid.
right.
You're
I am.
conflating
I am.
things.
I am.
These
That's
are
right.
not-
I am. I am. I am. Yes. Yes, I am. What other point were you making? So we understand micro and macro, the difference in there. The geological column. Oh yeah, we never did explain about dust on the Earth and the dust on the moon. All these billions of years you're talking about. I'm ready.
Once
Tony, do you
again,
know
I
this one,
sound
by
like
the way,
I'm
Tony?
plugging.
Did you do a video on
Yes,
this one? I
I
believe you
do.
did a video on this. I believe you did. Yes.
I did, in fact, do a video, and it was called, because I'm clever with my titles, it's called Moon Dust. So if you're looking up, don't get confused. It's the one
So
called
original.
because that's me, Mr. Originality. And yeah, I did quite a detail on it. Let me see if I can go over some of the small points on it. I could go through the history of how we got into space. It doesn't matter. The point is, the argument seems to appear all the time that before we ever landed on the moon, we expected that there would be some 7 or 8 foot, maybe 20-foot layer of dust. I'm not sure. But that came from a reading that was done in Hawaii, and it was not meteoric dust that actually had fallen on the detector. What had happened is when Explorer 8 in 1960 went up, Vanguard 3 in 1956, Sputnik 3 in 1958, Explorer 1, they actually did detections of the dust that was just intermittent there. They concluded that the amount of dust on the moon on average would have been equal to 1 gram per square centimeter, with certain geographical areas having a dust layer as deep as a full meter, and that was it. Other than that, there was never any prediction that there should have been a whole bunch of dust on the moon. There's a number of reasons why this is true. One of them is that because there is no atmosphere there, well, there is an atmosphere, but it is so unremarkable that it's not really worth discussing. Because there's not a very significant atmosphere there, there's nothing to plug in the spaces between dust. And so it actually just like anything else on Earth, it just coalesces, but at any rate, even at the rate of dust accumulation, there still should not have been anything more than a meter worth of dust. I can go down a few other points. There's another, I'm not sure which argument you're coming from. That was the first one. Now, I thought that argument was gone for several years.
Yeah.
But somebody resurrected it recently. April of 1993. Andrew Snelling, David Rush, they published an examination of the measurements and the creationist arguments regarding the amount of dust on the moon. They determined that the amount present was consistent with the evolutionist timeline. They advised their readers that the argument is one that creationists shouldn't use. I would suggest that to you, but neither Rush or Snelling actually speak for the entire creationist community. So very recently, in 2014, the argument was revived. NASA released a newly discovered measurement of dust damage to the solar panels on the moon, which is weird because solar panels shouldn't be getting dust damage. Only if there is an atmosphere should there be dust. Well, very soon after that, something was confirmed that astronauts had been saying for a long time, and NASA had said, "You're crazy, it can't be there." The moon has an atmosphere, has a small atmosphere. It's about the same as the atmosphere where the International Space Station is. There is an atmosphere there, but it's really unremarkable. Now, there's a guy named Larry Dye who calls himself the creation guy. He jumped on that in February 2015. He announced that the moon dust argument might still apply. But again, it was a little late. The solar panels actually showed that astronauts had already seen or it proved that astronauts were correct in that there was an atmosphere. They saw a haze from their spaceship outside of the moon's, if you will, atmosphere. I'm yielding the floor again.
And real quickly, I put the link. If you go to creation.com, which is Creationist Ministries International, and I know a lot of those people that work for them, a lot of those PhDs, it actually says which arguments should definitely not be used. Moon dust thickness proves a young moon. That is an argument that even creation.com says is completely wrong. Creationists should not use it. It was based upon misinformation of the initial conditions they thought they would find for the moon dust. Those equations they used were an error. They discovered that was a problem. They've corrected it. And as you said, Andrew Snelling and a few other PhDs from creation.com have said to creationists, do not use this argument. It is wrong. It's fallacious. And even if you go to their web page, creation.com, they'll tell you which arguments definitely should not use, and one of them is the moon dust thickness argument. So I thought I'd point that out to you, Pastor Williams. You may want to update that one, by the way. So.
Well, you know, not only did I say the moon, but I also say the Earth too. I mean,
Earth has dust. Trust me, I do it all the time. Yeah, we definitely think that Earth has dust.
If you don't believe me, come over and dust my apartment.
Yeah.
Well, I see. I got a hairball.
Go ahead, Pastor Williams.
Yeah, but the point that I'm trying to make is this: is that if for this billions of years old universe, you don't see the evidence of it. What do you see to justify you saying that, okay, it's billions of years old, that Homo sapien is 24,000 years old, and what you were saying before, I mean, it's a bit confusing. You say some things evolve, other things do not. Well, what is?
I didn't say that.
Yeah, who said that?
No,
who said that?
Who said that?
Nope. Tony never said that. I never said that either.
Let me say it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you what.
Tony, will you clarify?
Go ahead and finish. Sorry.
When you look at the frilled shark and when you look at the fruit fly, you were saying they did. You didn't say they didn't evolve. I just told you they didn't evolve. They did not evolve.
They did evolve.
They did not evolve.
Let him finish.
They did.
Go ahead, Pastor. Go ahead, Pastor.
Please continue, Pastor.
Look up the frilled shark did not. They found off the coast of Portugal. Did not evolve. Go do your research. The same thing.
According to whom? Wait, according to whom are you referring to? Who says that they didn't evolve? I'm curious.
BBC scientists. They all said it. The fossil record, based on the fossil. They compared. They compare. That's your homework. That's your homework assignment.
I know this story. I know this. I know what you're referring to. I can explain it, but I'm not the one doing this. Tony is.
Right.
Tony, do you want to explain that?
We need to get back to yes, please.
Tony,
for God's sakes, can we get on a straight tangent? Listen, this is going in
Tony.
places, and it's all.
Yeah, Tony.
Okay, hold on. Listen, we're gonna let Tony answer the question and clarify what he said to you a second ago. He didn't say what you thought he said. Let me clarify what he said, and then you can respond to it, and then let the pastor respond without anyone interrupting him as well, so that we can at least be fair. He's getting annihilated enough on the facts and
not either.
Let's not make it doubly hard. Okay, Tony.
No.
All right.
I'm not
Let me. Don't worry about that, Pastor. It's okay. As far to clarify what I said, I thought I'd given examples, but I kind of got off track. I was telling you about the difference between speciation and morphological change. Now, the evolution is really just at the genetic level. Now, sometimes those changes in genes, in fact, most of the time, they don't correspond to any major morphological change. I mean, you may not look like your brother, but you guys do have different genes. It happens. Morphological change is another thing entirely. A new limb, or maybe a longer limb, or just a larger size. If you're already well adapted, you're still going to keep evolving. Your genes are going to continue to change. But if you are already well adapted to your environment, there is no reason and there is no pressure for you to change. And there's no reason for anybody who has any new developments to be proliferated throughout your entire population. That's what the difference is. And I see you laughing, but I don't know how you don't see the distinction between the two. Now, the other thing that I was mentioning, you were mentioning, I'm not going to address it completely because you were talking about the age of the universe, which is not at all what we were discussing. We were discussing the age of Earth as depicted by the fossil record. We have gone way off of that. Now, if you want me to address the age of the universe, I can do that. And I can also tell you about technology you're using right now that is based on the very physics that determined the age of the universe to be circa 13 to 14 billion years old. I will do that. I don't think it's appropriate for this particular conversation. But again, I do want to come back to that racism sometime. I do think it's a valid subject. I do want to talk about it with you. So anyway, I'm yielding the floor again.
Okay, the thing I was saying this right here, and is that what was said with the FRILL shark and also with the fruit fly.
Oh yeah.
The study they did 30 years, and the study said that it did not evolve at all. They looked at the fossil record for the FRILL shark. It was found at the coast of Portugal in November last year. They said it was the fossil record said it was 80 million years old, and it had not changed at all. That's the thing I'm talking about as far as, and that's what I was saying about as far as being selective of saying some things evolve and some things do not. That's why I was about to ask, what is the trigger? And you were saying, well, the pressure. Well, if those things had adapted in order to live, that means that they adapted that environment. What pressures are you talking about? And so what you're doing, this is what evolutionists do. They change with the times. Whatever they think fits their argument at that moment, at that time, is what they change to. All of us have adapted. So that means nobody's going to change now. The apes, why do they change? Why do they branch off? I mean, if everything was adapted, why did it even bother to change? And this is the point I'm trying to make. And you're trying to say that, well, speciation brought about a change. Why do we have a throat? Why do we have a jaw? Why do we have a chin? What's the purpose for those things? When you're looking at evolution, why do we have an eye? Why is there even sex? Why do we have sex? What was it? If it was asexual, what? So wasn't it having opposite sexes? What was the point in doing that? If all these things, well, they survived, they adapted. And if you believe that evolution is true, then what is the end goal? What are we evolving to? Are we evolving to apes? Are we evolving to humans? What is the end goal? And that's what you said, well, we've adapted and things that are adapted and have suited themselves to the environment they're in, they don't change. And that's what I'm trying to say. That's when you disavow the thermodynamics, second law of thermodynamics, because you don't understand it. Like I'm seeing now that I don't think you fully understand the difference in microevolution and macroevolution.
We don't understand. Okay.
Are you done, Pastor? Are you done, Pastor Williams?
No. The other point I was going to make is this right here. You're talking about, as far as the carbon dating. I mean, that's one thing we started earlier, and we got away from it because this is what they tend to use for dating these 80 million year old FRILL sharks. They use carbon dating and radiometric dating, these other kind of things. And the thing you have to ask yourself this right here: where is the standard? Where's the standard? I just told you before is that they say that this atmosphere has not remained constant. And so if you're saying that, okay, there's a standard and it's released at this certain rate, it's decaying at this certain rate, or the half-life is this, where is the standard for making those assumptions? You don't have a standard. You are throwing things out there. You're making things up because you don't know, as was already stated, you don't know what the beginning was like. You don't know what the first rock was like. You don't know what the first tree was like. So then when you say, well, this is the half-life or this is what radioactivity was at this time, you don't know. You're just making things up as you go along. And that's what they do with evolution. They just make things up as they go along in order to try to make folks think that they know something that they don't know.
Tony?
Okay, well, you brought up a lot of points there. There's a number of questions that you've asked that really do deserve an answer. I don't think this is the forum for it, but as far as some of there was a number of things I could have answered genetically. But the things I think, because you've harped on them enough, I do need to go back to them. The frilled shark, you were saying how they were discussing that they're not at all changed. Now, I'm not prepared to discuss that one, but I'd love to ask, have you actually seen a comparison, personally seen a comparison between that modern day frilled shark and an 80 million year old fossil?
Yes, by what is had in the news, by what the scientists said.
I'm asking what you've seen with your own eyes.
Yeah, they had a picture of it. Yeah, they had a picture of the news.
Picture of what?
And what the scientists said of the frilled shark. And they said it had not changed.
Did they give you the Pepsi challenge to show one or the other?
Yes, they showed the two. They had a picture of it. Okay. They said it had not changed one iota in 80
Okay, well, let's go ahead and
years.
Okay, let's go ahead and get that article. If you can present that article, let's go ahead and put it in the description. If you guys don't mind, let the viewers decide for themselves if they're different. The other thing is fruit flies. I missed this one. I apologize for this. I don't know what you're thinking is morphological change. They did change. Those fruit flies did change. There were fruit flies that had eyes on their legs. They had eyes on their butts. They found places to put new functions. And so that's been done. But what has never been done? Nobody has ever tried. And I challenge you to find any paper that says this. Nobody has ever tried to make a fruit fly into something other than a fruit fly. In fact, that is, if they did that, that would not be evolution, because once you are a fruit fly, all of your descendants will be fruit flies. You can never escape who you came from. I figured that out at Thanksgiving last year. Anyway, as far as radiometric dating, dating, this is the last one. Thank you. As far as the radiometric dating, you were saying it's assumptions. And how do they make the assumptions? And I'm not going to go ahead and bother to go through how they came to those assumptions, but you're saying assumptions as if it's a bad thing. And assumptions are actually how you test a theory. You assume something to be true. It goes like this. If we assume theory A to be true, we should expect to see phenomenon B to occur when we conduct experiment or observation C. Now, what happens is you go out and you perform experiment or observation C. And if you don't see B, then you know A isn't true. If you do see B, you haven't proven A to be true, but you have supported it. And that's all anyone is saying about the theory of evolution. Even if the theory of evolution is wrong, completely wrong, it still has practical applications. We can still use it to develop different foods. We can use it to develop all kinds of medications, makeup, dyes. We use evolution to do that. Every year we get a new flu shot, assuming you're not, a paranoid conspiracy theorist. We get a flu shot because we assume evolution to be true, and we change the flu shot every year. So at any rate, with radiometric dating, we assume certain things to be true, and then we go and test the repercussions of that assumption. And with radiometric dating, one thing we should know to be true: if radiometric dating is in any way feasible, we should not see the evidence of, for example, superfluous heat or superfluous cold. When the rate of half-life accelerates, so does the amount of heat produced. We do not see any indication of that. And if we did see anything like, for example, with uranium and lead, that the half-life is supposed to be like close to the age of the universe. And if it was sped up enough to be accounted for within just 6,000 years, what's that? Age of the Earth? Sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
4.8.
Okay. Sorry about that.
4.6.
See, it's good to have people correcting me. I appreciate that. Thank you. At any rate,
I don't know. I don't know anything. So just FYI, I just make this stuff up.
That's good enough for me. I'll give you that. I'll give you that. If for some reason that amount of decay happened in 6,000 years, this planet would be a much hotter place.
Let me give you another example.
I'm yielding.
Creation, Sign, Evangelism. You go to their website, and they have here living penguins have been carbon dated as being 8,000 years old.
Oh my God! Can I start drinking now?
So who's?
Can we start drinking?
Who's dating?
Is it okay?
I mean,
this
other than my cousin.
Is creation science. And the point I'm trying to make is this right here. This stuff is not reliable. And you're trying to put out the word science. You're trying to put out as though, oh, everybody's in agreement. You got just a minute. Doctors, scientists with creation science evolution stating that this penguin, a living penguin, is 8,000 years old based on carbon dating.
How do you? I really got to ask. How do you? Carbon dating, by the way, is a destructive test. They have some new ways of doing it. But do you know what destructive means? It means they have to they have to pulverize it.
Yeah.
How do you pulverize a living penguin if it's living?
No, they can take a part of the living penguin.
I hate penguins. Give me a shot. So, I'll pulverize a penguin if I see one.
But anyways, but here's
the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is this: is that it's not reliable data.
Anyways, real quick, Pastor Williams, you know, these things that you're talking about are called Pratt's, points refuting 1,000 times. Tony Reed in his channel has addressed this as well. In fact, most channels have addressed this. It's due to the reservoir effect. It's a well-known thing that everybody who's ever looked into carbon dating knows about the reservoir effect. Even Ken Hovind recognizes the reservoir effect. These are all things that were back in the 80s creationists used. This is 2018. I think you need to get newer creationist canards, because those were debunked like 30 years ago about why those were not good arguments for creationists. I'm just trying to help you up your game a little bit, to get some newer kind of.
No. I think I'm trying to help you guys, because I see that a lot of what you were saying, you've been so indoctrinated that when someone presents truth to you, because you've been so indoctrinated, that's the way it can't be true. And like I said, with the frilled shark, like with the frilled shark, with the fruit fly. I mean, this is not old. This is not old history. This is something recent.
Okay, fair. Since we're kind of running out of time, do you mind if I just take 2 minutes to explain the fruit fly thing? Since I did bring it up to him, and I like for him to actually understand it. Do you mind, anybody? Okay, so the fruit fly thing, and with
I'm not sure it'll do any good.
No, I don't think it will either. But I think I know what he's having his confusion is. He's confusing pop science with actual science. He reads a headline that says scientists say evolution hasn't occurred, but when you go to read the papers, which he hasn't done, I guarantee it, no scientist has ever said this. Because what he's confusing is what's called a phenotypical change by a genomic change. As Tony had mentioned, evolution is at the gene level, it's at the genomic level. When we say an evolution has occurred, that means there's been a change in a frequency of a gene in a given population. So we have to look at the gene. We actually have to go in and do a gene sequencing of it, right? You can't do that on something that's 80 million olds. There's no DNA. So we cannot actually show that there's been genomic changes, but the actual shape, the actual way it looks, the morphological differences, right? They may not have changed that much. There may not have been a lot of phenotypical differences, but the genotypical differences are probably very vast. A shark today won't be able to mate with a shark 80 million years ago. A coelacanth would not mate with one from millions of years ago. A fruit fly, over successful generations, they have speciated into more than a different population of fruit flies that cannot to have reproduction with prior ones. Matter of fact, they also have selection. Sexual selection, where you have two populations of species, fruit flies, on different diets. One has maltose, one has, I think, sucrose, and their offsprings will eventually stop mating with each other because they have a different dietary requirement, and they have sexual selection. I think her name is Diane Dodd, did that experiment. So when you're talking about evolution didn't occur, you're just absolutely wrong, because evolution has to occur in each generation. If you didn't have evolution, you would have clones. And these are not clones. So if you don't have clones, you have evolution. So all you're doing is saying we don't. It doesn't look like it's changed that much physically. That's called the either morphological or phenotype, the resulting things from the genome. But that doesn't matter. As Tony pointed out, if you don't expect there to be a lot of selective pressures, you don't expect there to be a lot of physical changes because it's well adapted to its environment. That's what we expect. We would say, look at the conditions, look at how it is. The alligator hasn't changed that much because it's very adapted for what it is. So sharks are the same way. And a lot of species are very well adapted. They don't change that much physically because they've already reached their evolutionary niche for where they're at in geography-wise. Does that make any sense? Probably not, but I tried.
No, it does. Because one thing you said, what they're trying to do now, No, it doesn't, because what they're doing now, they're taking the mastodon. You heard of that? The
Yes, I know
relative to
the
the
master.
for the yeah, and they're taking it and they're trying to reproduce it because they say they're taking that seed from an elephant today and trying to use the DNA from that, and they're trying to bring it back. So to say that it does, they don't mate out like that. A FRILL shark today wouldn't mate with one from alien, and they're identical. No,
Just have
you're
an
not being
elephant
truthful.
sleep with a grizzly bear. Just have an elephant sleep
No,
with a grizzly bear, and you'll get a
no,
mastodon.
no. What? And that's what I'm saying. I mean, your argument is not consistent.
It's basic
Our
biology,
argument,
Pastor.
No, it's
It's
not.
really,
No,
it's really not complicated
no,
biology. It's not even an argument.
no.
Pastor,
And the thing you're saying about the fruit fly. I mean, part of the mating. I mean, I don't think you read the study. I don't think you have.
I can't believe you said
have.
that.
Wait, hang on.
We're
Like, how did I not
inconsistent?
read the study when I'm telling you about the study and you're telling me I didn't read them? Of course I've read this stuff because I'm telling you about it. I even knew the name of the author.
I'm the one that. No, I brought it up. I was the one that brought. You didn't bring it up. I brought it up.
Do you know what consistent means? Do you know what consistent means?
Wait, you brought up the Hawks genes? I never heard you mention Hawks genes.
Yeah, I was the one that brought the fruit fly. I was the one that brought the study.
Yeah, Tony, please jump in, Tony. We're at the we're kind of nearing the end, but
I need a drink. So let's wrap this.
Yeah,
I need a drink.
Don't drink anything and talk.
We're pretty much at close to the end, right? I mean, pretty much we're. I mean, we've decided we're not going really anywhere. Okay, it's devolved. But you know, Pastor, I really, I gotta say, I respect you. I mean, you seem like a really good guy. I looked at some of your platforms. I don't think I would have voted for you for mayor, but I do think you mean well. I do think you mean well. And that said, I recommend actually look up what evolution actually claims, what genetics actually claims, because you are making arguments here that are against things that the theory claims, like those that you're making, and finding out if the science says exactly that. I have a feeling if I go and look at the frilled shark that you're talking about, and I may be wrong, but I got a feel, look at it, it will have some very distinct differences in the modern morphology compared to the ancient morphology. And I've already seen that before because people have been talking about the horseshoe crab for years. And I looked, and yes, major differences between the modern horseshoe crab and the old horseshoe crab. The same with the coelacanth. There are some major differences that y'all just aren't taking into account. And I would encourage you to actually look into evolution and what it actually claims, and just to that, but at least argue against things that the theory actually claims. And that's where I'd like to close. Probably won't.
Okay, do I get a chance to come up to
Pastor?
Now,
Yes,
my time. Okay.
please.
What I like to say is that the Supreme Court got it right. They said that there must be the teaching of evolution because the teaching of creationism would be a violation of church and state. It wasn't that creationism was inferior science. And so they knew and understood that if you eliminate creationism, the only thing left is evolution. And so that's what they used to fill the gap. And there is nothing of 1968 when it happened. And so what we've had a generation of people that have been indoctrinated by this false teaching rather than people that have been indoctrinated by the Word of God. The Word of God said God made everything out this kind before DNA was even discovered. God made that statement. God didn't say anything about we evolving from trees or apes or chimpanzees or monkeys. Everything that God says, we can support it with science. And so what I'm saying is that because of the indoctrination, because of what people have been taught, and this is one thing they said about Adolf Hitler, our intelligence agency, when talking about him. They say Hitler believed that if you tell a person a lie long enough, they will believe it. And this is what has happened with evolution. The lie has been told so long that people are now taking it as fact. As a matter of fact, a lot of people no longer use the term theory of evolution. They simply use evolution. And so that's the point I'm trying to make. If you get back to the Word of God, you get back to what God teaches, if you understand what God's Word says, you'll find there is no need for putting out evolution. But because we've strayed away from the Word of God, we look for something else other than what God's Word says, we've brought into the lies of evolution. Everything that God said in the book of Genesis, you can find it validated, you can find it supported. Life came from the dust of the earth. The ingredients for life is right there. If you look at the age of man now, the population of the earth now, based on what the book of Genesis said, where we are now, it fits the narrative. It doesn't fit. You look at 24,000 years and try to bring people in, and as was said earlier, when you try to say, well, okay, well, population growth wasn't consistent. That's what evolutionists do. They try to plug things in to fit their argument. Rather say, okay, let's be consistent. Let's state what the facts say. And that's all the Bible does. It states facts. Evolutionists, they don't. They are constantly changing their arguments. Thank you. Thank you for the time. Love being on here. Thank you for the invitation. And
that TV's going to fall, I swear.
Hold on, Pastor.
What did that desk ever do to you?
Hold on.
That desk. I mean, you just hate that desk.
We've got a lot of super chats and you might get some questions here, Pastor. But I want to ask you, when you say the word evolution, are you meaning to say creation? Because I think that's what you're meaning whenever you were that last thing that you were saying about how evolution does this and evolution does that. I think you mean creation, because the biggest lie that's been told around the world, and the most often to confuse people and to indoctrinate them, like the quote you said, would be religion. That would be the one lie that has been told over and over again to convince people of something. So I think you're getting the words confused, right, Pastor?
I think he's getting a lot
Please
of
tell
things
me.
confused. But you agree with that, Pastor?
No. It's evolution. I mean, and
by the way,
it's not proof.
Well, you don't prove theories. The theory of gravity is not proven, but go jump off a cliff and tell me if gravity doesn't kill you, because you're going to die. So it is a real thing. Gravity exists, whether the theory of gravity is proven or not, because you can't prove the theory of gravity. But anyways, I think you have a real weird disjunction there, because it's not a real. It's not creation or evolution. There are other things that could be as well. So you have a false dichotomy. But anyway, super chats. Here we go. Ready. Ian Bond, $5. Is there anything I should specifically mention or avoid? Oh no, that's the wrong one. That's from yesterday. Okay, sorry. $5 from message deleted. Don't know who that was. It was deleted, but thank you. Condor Mad had $5. Has the pastor ever seen a wolf give birth to a non-wolf? Where did dogs come from? Where were they in the ark? That's for question for you. So we evolutionists know that dogs evolved from wolves because of the same species, Canis lupus. One's is Canis lupus domesticus or familiaris. How did wolves and dogs relate in the creationist model? Because have you ever seen a wolf give birth to a non-wolf?
In my family, my sister is so light-skinned that there are children that called her white. In my family, my brother is so dark-skinned that you would think that he was African. In one family, we're talking about microevolution versus macro.
That's not
we're talking about micro. We're talking about micro versus macro. Understand the difference. We're talking about going from one form to another.
I really do. No, you. Let me correct you, because you don't understand the difference. What you're describing is called variation.
I do understand the difference.
I guarantee you don't. I guarantee it. I guarantee you do not. Trust me, sir. You're talking about variation. Okay.
I thought you were going to say they were wolves. I thought you were going to say
wait. First, we are going to have an after show. We are going to have an after show. You're going to join us for the after show, Pastor, because we can get into it more.
Today?
Say yes, please. Yeah, tonight. Yeah, come on. You got time.
How long will it be?
Oh, as long as you want. Seriously.
How long?
Yeah, how long?
10 minutes.
So you think? Come on, I really do want to have a discussion with you on that. Anyway, so Nicholas, Brand, $5. The Portuguese shark wasn't a fossil; it was a living frilled shark. That's true. They call them living fossils. It's a misnomer. But most of us who actually looked into this understand it's a misnomer. David Dallafor, by the way, hey, hope you're doing good, David. It's been a while. $2. Define kinds. I don't want to do that right now. We're not going to go that route. David, $2.
Terminology.
Terminology defines kinds for them. But I mean, if you wanted to, Pastor, do you have a quick definition for kinds? Just one word, what you think for kinds?
It's what the Bible says. Everything is made out of this kind of DNA.
There's my one word
So
definition. Wrong.
DNA is a kind.
If you, yeah, that's why. No. What I'm saying is you have the same DNA structure. What I'm trying to say, we have similar DNA to fruit flies, but we're not a fruit fly because fruit fly have only a certain about 66% of the same DNA that we have. Humans have the same DNA structure, so that's why I consider kind.
Oh, okay, I didn't get that. But Brandon, $2.
Yeah.
Where do you
got that? Stop playing. Stop playing. You did get it.
I honestly, I'm not fronting. I'm not fronting with you. I'm telling you, and I'll explain.
Okay.
I'll explain to you.
All right, go on.
The words.
Okay.
The words you are using are not the words you think they mean to everybody else listening. I assure you, and they'll explain this to you.
I forgot. Because of the Bible, I'm from a biblical perspective, and I forgot you guys are not coming from a biblical perspective.
Yeah, your terminology is
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
It's not even the correct word from the Bible. If you look in the Greek, it was actually the word for genus, which genos. But anyways, Condor, don't use big words. He's a 5-year-old. Yeah. Okay. Where do you find these, Brandon? Where do you find these nut jobs? Well, that's what we do. We find people. AC Castillo, $2. Can't stay. I have to watch this later. Thanks, NonSequitur. Hope you do.
Look,
and I'm going to pronounce this correct. What, Kyle?
I said, lucky you.
Yeah. Dumpster Fire Friday. I am going to pronounce this guy's name right this time because I was corrected by Dave. The Fuckaboy Assassin. Is that how you do it, Dave? Fuckaboy Assassin? Fukaboy? Fuckboy. No, Fuckboy Assassin. Is that right? Dave, help me out here.
What is
happening? You can pronounce you can spell your name Smith and pronounce it Jamalski if you want to. So it doesn't matter.
We're gonna say
it's Fuckboy Assassin. Yes.
That's what I thought. Okay, so Fuckboy Assassin, $2. This guy better win some smoking nuns. Yeah, he might be eligible for some smoking nuns, but you know what? People already been voted, so you got to go to and vote for the smoking nuns. Mrs. V, $2. I'm not racist. Batshit crazy isn't a race. That's very true. That's very true. I think you might have won the super chat for the night on that one. I have Toth, $5. It wouldn't matter even if Linnaeus or Darwin was racist or said racist things. Modern evolutionary theory considers all race one species. Very good. And by the way, I still want to ask, I got to ask this. I really do. I'm sorry. You read the Order of Species. Can you give me an example of a race Darwin used in Order of Species? Just give me one example.
Well, I mean, he was talking about animals and plants, but he's also talking about, as I said, savage races.
Talking about cabbages
and Africans.
No, that's a different book.
But
that's a different book.
I said it's savage. That's what I'm trying to say, but he wrote it. He was the writer. He was the author of both books.
Let me finish. You keep interrupting me. The races in the book we're talking about, Origin of the Species, just that book was domesticated plants and animals for cultivation, such as things like pigeons and cabbages and things of that nature. That's what they meant by favored races. It had nothing to do with people. It had nothing to do with skin color. Not in that book. So when you're talking about favored races and Origin of Species, you cannot apply it to people. That's just fundamentally wrong, guaranteed. And if you don't believe me, go read the book.
That was a good question. So if it was racist, that would not take away from any of the the science that he put forth.
Not at all.
I mean, it'd be horrible.
And you know what I would say to that? And you know what I would say to that? I only hear European whites saying that. I don't hear black Africans saying that. We see the racism in it, but you don't.
Well, that's not true.
I'll offer you a refutation to that. I'll offer you a refutation to that. It's a little bit different.
Yeah.
But there is a movie that you might have seen, and I most people haven't, and I don't recommend you see it, but there's a movie called Birth of a Nation that came out like the 30s, I believe, and it is one of the most racist pieces of crap ever put on celluloid. But at the same time, it came up with a number of ideas in terms of editing, in terms of framing. And even though it is a racist thing, I have seen Spike Lee talk about what a great film it is, despite the fact that it is racist. The point I'm making here is that there are racists out there, and they're racist on every side of it. If you're going to tell me there are no creationist racists, I'm going to call you a liar to your face. If you're going to tell me that there are no evolutionists, if I may use the term, that are racist, I'll call you a liar to your face. There's a problem there. But the fact of the matter is, evolution is testable, and that's why it's science. We can actually take it and make something happen with it. You cannot take the assumption of a creation event and make any discoveries. And how do I know that? Because no discovery has ever been made by testing any prediction made by any hypothesis derived from the assumption of a creation event. I asked you that in the beginning, and you still have not delivered that. I yield the floor.
I'm fanning the burn. I'm fanning the burn, Pastor. You got to be
okay.
I thought he farted.
I'm so
I
sorry.
thought he muted his mic and farted like
this is what it is. What I say about the creation of man made from the dust of the earth, all the ingredients of life is in the dust of the earth. You say nothing but there. All right. How did Moses know that the tectonic plates, was broken up to cause flooding on the earth? How did Job know that the earth was floating in space?
Pastor,
I'd love to answer that. Okay, first of all, I'm going to tell you that I got to respond to that. The whole tectonic plate. Never mind. Go ahead.
Pastor,
Sorry.
Pastor.
What I was saying as far as the racism. Now you said it's testable, it's verifiable. How do you test for savage races?
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
How do you? Well, you got it.
This is what Darwin wrote about.
Pastor,
we've already explained.
Pastor, you have to let us talk.
So it can't be tested.
Pastor, you have to let us talk. He's already explained the savage races meant uncivilized. Okay, so you're not understanding that correctly. But you asked Tony a question. Let me get the last super chat out first. We get that out of the way. Tony can. And
if we want him to calm down, Steve. If we want him to somebody pass around an offering plate. That's the only way that he's going to calm down.
There you go. Give him some money. Give him some money.
You want
man. Damn. Okay. Last thing. $5 super chat from Sofredo. Is there such a thing as a man-to-fish scientific method with actual observational results? We don't observe historical record. We don't observe the birth of the universe or whatever that is. We don't observe, like our star. We can't go back and see it form, but we can look at the evidence from what we see now. The observational science means what we observe now, not what we observe over billion years ago. So we do see the record from fish to man monophyletically. Yes, there's overwhelming evidence. Matter of fact, Tony talked about that. He had Neil Shubin, who actually predicted where to find Tiktaalik based upon what his understanding of phylogeny and evolution said. Where would we find something that has these particular traits? And he went out and found it in Canada. So what was it? It wasn't Nova Scotia. It was
Nunavut.
I always forget the name of this. Nunavut. Yeah, thank you. So, so he predicted where to find that. So yes, we can actually do that. So, but anyways, Tony, you want to address what you were going to before? Sorry, because we were just kind of talking.
I've already started the rum and coke night, so I don't even remember what.
Well, we're going to have an after show on this show.
Sorry.
We're not going to do a rum and coke night tonight. This is worth having an after show on this channel.
Okay.
It has been memorable. I will say this. Listen, Pastor, I think you're a likable guy. I think you seem really nice. There are very few people that I think would have given George Lujack a run for his money. And
it's up there. It's close. Close.
I must say.
He's no Edgar.
I tell you what, since you're right down the road from me, we just go get a beer and continue this at the bar. What do you say?
I don't drink beer.
Why not?
That's not
Scotch.
Jesus drink wine. Scotch. Yeah, Scotch. Yes, have some Scotch.
There you go. Okay, great. Well, so we're gonna have an after show. I almost opened my mouth and said, "Okay, I'm gonna let these guys wrap up their points," but I forgot we already started to do that an hour ago. So we've crossed that. We've crossed that bridge. Okay.
Yeah, a few times.
We're going to go into the after show in about 45 minutes, roughly, right?
Yeah, that works. 8 o'clock.
Oh, they just keep coming. Oh, man.
You want to read that one?
That's a big one.
Can you read it?
Yeah, it says, love the job, everyone, Kyle and Steve. That's from Brainary. I'm gonna say binary. That's from Brainary for $50. Thank you so much.
Well, it's 56.
Wow.
It's $5. It's still. Thank you for every little bit.
It's 50.
Yeah.
We love sex.
Swedish
coins.
Yeah.
Kroners. Yeah.
Oh,
Swedish kroners.
I pay no attention to. I should start paying attention to the do that. And it seems like the ones that I read, I always screw up because I always get the ones with the international denomination. That's on purpose.
I saw one of the symbol the other day. I still don't know what the heck that was. It was something I've never seen before, and I got to go check it out.
Oh hell, maybe that means creation is true. I can't trust anything anymore.
Yeah, and the moon landing was a hoax. And by the way, it is true. Moon is a hologram. NASA couldn't afford to make the dark side, so that's why it faces us the same way, because there was just a funding issue, a budgetary considerations. If you don't believe me, go look it up. It's a true story. There you go. Everybody knows that.
Okay.
Right, Tony?
So
yeah,
absolutely. Bad special effects.
I want to thank Tony Reed and Pastor. It was a. Are you going to join?
He said he would. Yes.
Excellent. A good deal. So we will we'll come back in about 45 minutes. Steve, anything else you want to say before we close out?
No, Tony, are you coming back too?
Yeah, I'm gonna go down and have a tamale or two, but then I'm gonna come back. Yeah, awesome. Certainly.
Dr. Griffith's gonna join us, and I made Dr. May's May. I don't know if she was in there. Oh, hey, my brain area. Okay, let's make it 50 then. Oh, dude, yeah, look at that. Wow,
nice.
Awesome. Holy crap, nice. You are the winner for tonight. Thank you.
You win the night. That was.
And if you want, in the super, can we invite him in the after show?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Anybody actually,
that's
so
crazy.
Just let us know. Yeah, come on in.
Okay. The stream that never ended finally has to come to an end. We will be back in about 45 minutes with Pastor Williams and Tony Reed and whoever else wants to join us. You can come in. We can talk. Let's keep this party going, I guess. I'm going to smoke a blunt and then I'll be back.
I'm going to get alcohol. I'm not doing this sober. I'm sorry.
Me too.
This is so many things to address that he got wrong. Fundamentally wrong. But
Good
thank
night,
you,
everyone.
Pastor. You're a fun guy. You're a fun guy, though, Pastor. I got to admit, you're a fun guy.
Yeah. Good night.
If I was sitting next to you on a bus or something, I'd enjoy talking to you, dude. I have nothing against you.
The passion is what I like.
Say good night, Tony.
Say good night, Tony.
Good night, Tony.
Non sequitur. Your facts are uncoordinated.